Most families have one. Not the difficult child, not the black sheep. Something quieter than that and honestly harder to name. The child who works just as hard, who shows up just as consistently, who brings their real effort to the table, and watches the room respond differently when their sibling walks in. Nobody plans it, nobody announces it. It just becomes the weather of the house, the emotional climate everybody breathes without ever naming it out loud. And the child who feels it, they don't explode. Not at first. What they do is something much more psychologically interesting and much more dangerous. They go quiet. They adjust. They tell themselves the story isn't about them. They work harder, try again, bring the next offering, wait for the response that keeps not quite arriving in the form they needed. And all that time, something is building underneath the surface of their daily life that nobody in the family is equipped to see or willing to look at. The thing that builds has a clinical name. But before psychology gave it one, a very old text recorded it with almost surgical precision. The story is Cain and Abel, and most of us have been taught to read it as a morality tale. Bad brother, good brother, divine punishment, lesson learned. I think that reading misses the entire point. What the text actually gives us, if you read slowly enough, is a portrait of a family system that failed one of its children before anyone ever picked up a stone. If you are just listening to me for the first time, my name is John, and I love drawing psychological inference from scriptures. Please subscribe, like, and share for more content. The offerings have been made. The smoke has cleared. Cain is still standing at the altar. His hands still smell like the earth he's spent his life working. That particular smell of soil turned and tended, the physical record of real labor. He brought the fruits of the ground. It was his work, his hands. Abel's offering, the firstborn of his flock, the fat portions, is accepted. Cain's is not. The text doesn't dramatize this moment. It doesn't give us fire from heaven or a thundering voice. It just gives us the outcome, stated plainly, and then something far more interesting. It gives us Cain's face. His countenance falls. That's the phrase. And then it says, God saw this. God clocks the face before any word is spoken, before any action is taken. Which tells you that what happened to Cain in that moment was visible. It was written on him, the way certain feelings write themselves on a person without asking permission. What does that face look like? I've thought about this a lot. It's not fury, not yet. It's that specific expression a person makes when they've just received information that destabilizes something fundamental. The jaw tightens slightly. The eyes go flat. There's a stillness that isn't peace. Something behind the face has just quietly rearranged itself, and the rearrangement is permanent. He's standing next to his brother. Abel, as far as we know, says nothing. The text gives Abel almost no interior life at all. He's present, his offering is accepted, and he continues to exist while his brother stands there holding a loss he has no language for. Nobody reaches into that moment. Nobody asks. The silence after the altar is the silence where everything that follows is born. That face, that silence, that brother standing close enough to touch. Here's what was really going on underneath that. And it requires us to be more precise about language than most readings of this story bother to be. The Hebrew word used when Cain's countenance falls is nephal. And it doesn't mean drooping. It means collapsing. Something structural giving way. When I first sat with that word long enough to feel it, it shifted everything I thought I understood about this passage. Because what collapses in that moment isn't Cain's mood. It's his sense of standing. His felt sense of where he sits in the relational order of the world he's been born into. Psychologists call what Cain experiences here narcissistic injury. And I want to be careful with that term because in popular usage it's become almost synonymous with arrogance, which is not what it means clinically. What it actually describes is the sharp, destabilizing pain that follows when a person's self-concept, their working image of who they are and how they're regarded, takes a direct hit from an external evaluation. The research on narcissistic injury, built significantly on Heinz Kohut's self-psychology, shows us that the people most vulnerable to it aren't the most arrogant. They're often the most approval-dependent, the ones who have been quietly calibrating their worth against external responses for so long that a single rejection doesn't just sting. It restructures. I've read a lot of clinical literature on rejection sensitivity, and very little of it captures what the Bible captures in 3 Hebrew words. His countenance fell. That's the whole phenomenology of narcissistic injury in one physical image. The face collapses because something underneath the face just did. In 2026, this is the employee who gets passed over for a promotion they genuinely earned and who doesn't argue or confront, who instead goes quiet in meetings, stops volunteering ideas, starts arriving exactly on time and leaving exactly when the clock says to, while something hardens in them slowly and nobody thinks to ask what's happening. The performance looks fine. The wound is invisible. And the family system, the workplace, the household, the sibling relationship keeps moving without ever looking back. On the outside, Cain looked like a man who was angry, but underneath, psychology tells us something different was happening, something that had probably been happening long before the altar. Honestly, I think the traditional reading of this story has gotten it wrong for 2,000 years by treating the offering as the beginning of Cain's problem. I don't think it was. I think the offering was the moment an existing wound became impossible to ignore. Consider the household these brothers grew up in. Adam and Eve are carrying something enormous, the specific grief of people who have lost paradise, who have experienced divine rejection firsthand, who are building a life outside the only home they've ever known. Exile is in the emotional DNA of this family. Loss is the founding story. And children don't just inherit their parents' eye color, they inherit the emotional climate. They breathe it. They calibrate themselves to its pressures without ever being told the name of what they're calibrating to. What developmental psychologists call affect attunement, the ability of caregivers to mirror and validate a child's emotional states, requires that the caregiver have access to their own emotional world first. Parents carrying unprocessed grief and shame are often, without any conscious intention, emotionally unavailable in the specific ways their children most need. Not cold, not cruel, just not quite there. And a child who grows up reaching for emotional attunement that arrives inconsistently learns to treat any form of acceptance as a lifeline, learns to work for love rather than receive it. The offering wasn't Cain's first attempt to be seen. It was just the one that finally made the answer undeniable. Picture a family, and you might not have to picture hard. 2 kids, different temperaments, different strengths, genuinely different in the ways siblings often are. Parents doing their best, which is real and matters and is also sometimes not enough. The older one works in a more visible field and brings results the family can point to. The younger one works quietly, consistently, in ways that are harder to quantify, harder to celebrate at a dinner table. Neither is trying to compete. The competition is invisible, ambient, structural, built into the way praise distributes unevenly in any household where 2 people are doing different things and one thing photographs better. If you've ever sat at a family gathering and felt, not jealousy exactly, but that particular low-grade ache of watching someone else's wins land with a warmth that yours never quite got, you know the room Cain is standing in. The altar is just a dinner table. The offering is just a report card, a salary, a relationship, an achievement brought to the family and offered up, wanting a specific kind of response that doesn't come in the form you needed. We don't talk about this enough, how sibling pain doesn't usually look like sibling pain. It looks like someone who's fine, someone who's maybe a little withdrawn lately, a little harder to reach, but nothing alarming. The alarm doesn't sound until something breaks, and by then everyone is too focused on what broke to ask what had been cracking for months. Social media has made this so much worse in 2026. Because now the comparison isn't just within your family. The whole curated highlight reel of your sibling's life is visible to everyone who knows you both. Their promotion is public. Their relationship is documented. You can watch 100 people celebrate the version of your sibling that you've been quietly measuring yourself against your whole life. And you do it alone on your phone at 11 p.m., and no one in the world knows what that costs you. That cost has a name. The Bible recorded it. We're only now learning to take it seriously. There's a verse in this chapter that I've always found physically unsettling. And it's not the one everyone expects. It's not the murder. It's what happens right before it. God sees Cain's fallen face and says, "Why are you angry? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door." I've sat with this question for a long time, and I still don't know what to do with it entirely. On one reading, this is God extending extraordinary grace, seeing Cain's distress, naming it, and offering him a path forward. A genuine warning, a real invitation. And I take that reading seriously. But here's the tension I can't resolve. Cain never asked for an explanation of why his offering was rejected. God never gives one. The text doesn't tell us why. Generations of theologians have proposed answers. The quality of the offering, the attitude of the heart, the order of birth. And the honest answer is that none of them are in the text. The text simply says God did not regard it, and then immediately pivots to asking Cain why he's upset about that, without ever acknowledging that the upset might be, at least partly, a reasonable human response to an unexplained rejection. If God is both the one who rejected the offering and the one asking Cain why he's struggling with the rejection, what does that mean for how we read divine authority alongside human emotional reality? I'm not asking that to destabilize anyone's faith. I'm asking it because I think the church has often, in its rush to get to the moral of this story, skipped past the very human cry embedded in Cain's silence. The cry of someone who brought their real effort to the altar and received no explanation for why it wasn't enough. What responsibility does any authority, divine, parental, institutional, bear for the emotional aftermath of an unexplained rejection? I want to pause here for a moment, genuinely, because I've just asked a question that I don't have a clean answer to, and I'd rather sit in that with you than pretend I do. Was there a moment in your family or growing up, or maybe right now, where someone's pain was visible but nobody reached into it? Where the countenance fell and the household kept moving? I want to know what that looked like in your life. Not the theological version, the real one. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I mean that. Some of the most important thinking I've done on these stories has come from what people share there. No, that's not quite right either, the way I've been framing what comes next. Because I want to be careful here not to offer a resolution that the story itself refuses. Cain's story ends in exile. Abel is gone. The family is fractured in a way it will never fully recover from. The redemptive content here is not Cain's healing. It's what his story forces us to see about what intervention looks like before the irreversible moment arrives. Because the text gives us something remarkable, actually. Between the fallen countenance and the murder, there is a gap. Days, possibly. Time in which the trajectory was not yet fixed. And in that gap, God speaks. Warning, naming, offering an alternative. Which means the story is not a fatalistic one. It's a story about a window, a real one, that closes. Psychologist James Pennebaker spent decades studying what happens when people are given the language to name what they're carrying. His research showed consistently that the act of articulating an emotion, not just feeling it, but giving it a name and a shape, measurably reduces its physiological grip. The pressure drops, the body unclenches, The decision-making that was being hijacked by a flooded nervous system starts to come back online. Cain needed someone to sit with him in that gap and help him find language for what his fallen face already knew. That's not psychoanalyzing God. That's reading the family system and noticing the absence. The redemptive question this story leaves us with is not what Cain should have done. It's what the people around him could have done first, and whether we're doing it now, in the families we're actually living inside. Here's the thing about Cain's story that I think we've been too uncomfortable to say plainly. He is the first person in recorded human history to feel the specific, searing pain of being the child whose offering didn't land. The one whose work didn't receive the response it needed. The one who stood at the altar and came home changed. Every person who has ever sat in a therapist's office and tried to explain why their sibling's success feels like their own failure. They are, in some sense, continuing a conversation that started here. Every family therapist who has ever drawn a genogram and tried to map the invisible emotional inheritance passing from parent to child to grandchild, they are working in a field that Cain's story made necessary. What this story gave the world, if we read it as something other than a simple morality tale, is the first honest account of what happens inside a family system when emotional pain is left unaddressed. The first case study. The first documentation of how comparison wounds, how rejection festers, how a person who needed to be seen and wasn't can eventually become unrecognizable to themselves. That documentation is a gift, a painful one. But it means that anyone who recognizes themselves in Cain, not in the violence but in the longing that preceded it, is not alone in an experience that nobody has named. They're walking a path that was recorded thousands of years ago precisely because someone understood that this pain was human and recurring and worth preserving. Your resentment is not evidence of a broken character. It is evidence of unmet need that deserves a real conversation. Not silence, not shame, not a countenance that falls and stays fallen until something worse finds its way out. I want to leave you with something simple, not a summary, just a question. Think about the family you grew up in, or the one you're building now. Is there someone in it whose countenance has been falling? Not dramatically, quietly, incrementally. A withdrawal so gradual it barely registered as a change. A person who stopped bringing their offerings to the table because the table's response had taught them something about what to expect. And if that person is you, how long have you been carrying that? How long has the resentment been building in the silence that nobody thought to break? Drop that in the comments. The real version, not the composed one. Because the only way this story stops repeating in our families is if we're willing to say out loud what Cain never got to say. If someone in the room is brave enough to reach into the gap before it closes. If this one stayed with you, the previous video goes hand in hand with it. We looked at what jealousy and resentment do to a person once they're already in motion. The psychological spiral, the stages, the way one unprocessed emotion can quietly reorganize an entire life. The link is right below and on the screen now. Watch them together if you can. I think the sequence matters.